Some of the most dangerous advice given to dads in separation is just fight harder. And listen, dad, that advice has cost a lot of men a lot of years. It's cost children safety. It's cost families trust. Today's conversation, it's a rad one, man. I got to meet Gary just from some online connections, and this conversation is not about forcing reunifications with your kid. I know many of you are you're separated from your kids. So it's about becoming the kind of man reunification is possible with if and when the time is right. Remember that if and when the time is right. So my guest today is Gary, man. He's lived the pain of losing contact with his sons for years. Out of that loss, he's built work focused on preparing fathers not to demand access, but to rebuild themselves first. We're going to talk about his community and who's it for, who's it not for. So this episode is for dads. They're willing to hear the harder truth. Guys, every time I want to sharpen the sword. If there's friction and there's pain and there's things like that, and you're feeling it on when you listen to this, that's a good thing. That's what we want. Reunification is not owed. It's earned through regulation, consistency, leadership. Gary's going to walk you down this road of what he had to do and what he does with dads as well. So you can see a path. There's no shortcuts. This episode might frustrate you, but if you're ready to grow up for your kids, this will absolutely transform you. And Gary, when we first sort of got into contact and I started looking into the stuff that you had, first of all, your story is remarkable. And I want to just start there because I think every dad listening is really wanting to build trust and some kind of something they can hold on to in a world of all kinds of weirdness and confusion. So, Gary, what I love is let's jump into your story, man. Let's jump into the moment to where you were at. Divorce is happening, and this pain that you're feeling. What was that like? Walk us through that journey for you, Gary.
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you so much for having me on. I love all the work that you're doing with dads. So, my journey when I was going through it, like many fathers, it felt like nobody else understood what I was actually going through. And just the journey in speaking with so many fathers now, I realize mine is fairly minor compared to many others. But let me share a part of my journey here. 11 years ago, I went through a divorce. In fact, it was longer than that. It was 3 years before. But 11 years ago is when I lost contact with my two sons for over 3 years. And leading up to that was a sequence of events where I just wasn't prepared to handle the situation with my sons. What it was I got into a relationship about 3 years after getting divorced. And everything was great with this woman. And so I thought, let me introduce, I'd been dating her for about 7 months or so. And I thought, let me introduce her to my sons. I see having a future with her. And I introduced my sons to her. Probably could have done that a little bit better, but I feel it was okay in the beginning stages. My sons accepted her for about 6 months, up until the point that I said she was going to be moving in with me. And then over the next 4 months, things just spiraled down and down and down. I think the fears from what you see on Disney movies about the terrible stepmother, and there's not great stories about this. And I think that combined with a number of other factors resulted in enormous fears, thinking in their minds I was going to completely abandon them and that this woman would then replace them altogether. And that was never, ever my intention. But understanding in the little minds of a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old at the time, I can just imagine how terrible this must have been for them. So things got worse and worse and worse and worse. That the day that she moved in was the last time that I saw my sons for 3 years, where I was stubborn, thinking I'm the parent here. I can't let my say then if she were to become my wife, move out when my sons come around. It had to be a situation where they would get used to the situation, used to her being there. But I didn't understand the pain that they were going through, the uncertainty they were going through. I think I was pretty stubborn in this. And there were obviously many other factors I don't want to really go into here that inflamed the situation. But a large part of this was not knowing from my side, where I realized I could have navigated it differently. that could have reduced so much of the tension and communicated slightly differently with my sons. But really, fast forward about must have been 7 months into not seeing my sons. And every week that went by, I kept thinking it might be next week that I'll have some contact with them. And it was such a load on my shoulder of not knowing how to actually navigate this. How do I bridge that gap again where they were so angry, and how to move forward? And weeks turned into months. And it was 7 months into not seeing my sons where I met up with my mentor. At the time, he was probably in his late 50s, and so many years older than me. And I said to him, I don't understand. Why are my sons so angry? I don't understand why I don't get to see my sons. And he said to me, Gary, what is the gift in this situation?
Oh,
I'm
that's
like,
good.
what do you mean, what is the gift? I was actually pretty angry with him.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
how can this be a gift? How can there be any good in me not seeing my sons? And then I realized I can't keep spiraling down, putting my life on hold, because my life completely put on hold. Everything in my life started spiraling down because not having my sons there was impacting my life in many, many ways. I ended up in hospital. I couldn't focus on my business. My health was just getting worse and worse. And I realized I've got to turn my life around. I can't keep focusing on the injustice of this and how to fix this by forcing them back into my life. I needed to just put the gas mask on myself and get my shit together. And that's where it became a bit of a turning point to completely change the course of my life. Roll the clock forward, things didn't immediately turn around from that point, but it did in terms of the path from the downward spiral. I started turning that spiral around in exercising and eating healthily and reading more and getting into meditation, a lot of tools that I now share with fathers that became the foundation for many of those tools. But a pivotal moment took place a year into not seeing my sons. And this is where I started doing many more things that were challenging my body, getting into running, a lot of deeper meditation. I then set myself a challenge to sleep the night in a forest alone in a waterproof sleeping bag, which I'd never done before, but let me just try this. Let's go and do this. And so
Where did you do that at? Because
this isn't a
I know
forest.
you've been in a
Yeah,
lot of
this is
countries.
a forest in England. It's not like bears or anything like that. The most dangerous creature might have been a squirrel, but it was my own mind was probably the most dangerous thing at that moment. And so just before turning off my phone and going into the forest, I checked my phone one last moment just to see my email, habit. And I saw an email from my son's school. And in the email, I saw that my son had changed his surname.
Mm,
And this felt like a knife going so deep inside of me, thinking in my mind. I remember the thoughts. This might not be a few months. This could be a decade or 2 decades before I'd see my sons again. And it changed the course of my life. From this downward spiral that I was going in, despite many other areas being resolved in my life, it still couldn't get a lot of my life back on track. And I ended up doing a complete life reboot. And I ended up moving to an entire different continent from England to South America. And a large part of this was pure survival and the healing process I had to go through. I kept on in this process sending maintenance money. But at that stage, I was blocked from my son's phones. It was so painful driving past their house and close to them. It was just such suffering I was going through, and just this uncertainty, and constantly almost looking over my shoulder. Am I going to bump into my sons? How is that going to go? Shame along with us, them not knowing the story, me stuck in my own story, and just replaying and replaying that I had to do this reboot. So
amazing.
just a
Here,
very quick overview of what took
I
place.
know there's like so much in all of that that I really want to jump into that moment when the kids, where there's this separation. You were wanting, to better your life, right? To bring this woman that you love, and it was sort of like the adage, my way or the highway, and they went the highway. And I think the dads and the dads that I talk to, the dads that you talk to, there's these thoughts that come in their mind. And I'd love to just jump into your brain for a second and because I want them to hear that those thoughts that they have might be similar to your thoughts, you know? And when that happened for you, what were some of those thoughts that were jumping into your brain?
Back then when the separation was taking place,
Yeah.
I just was thinking, "I am the adult. You can't behave in this way and misbehave to try and sabotage the relationship," and there was a lot of sabotaging that was taking place,
Yeah.
and that made me dig my heels in, and they ended up digging their heels in, and I was just a completely different human being back then to what I am now and how would actually navigate this. I think so much of this world implodes because of the lack of communication and,
Mm.
um, almost imagining what somebody else is actually thinking. It's this not actually having the conversation, you're just making it up in your own mind
Yeah.
what's going through their mind. So was I think I felt there are young little kids that are just trying to sabotage my life,
Yeah.
um, they're misbehaving, um, but I think they were just handling it in the way that they knew how to handle it. There were so many factors there that were probably going on in their own minds.
What about when they left
No.
and when they're now gone and you're in this house or apartment or wherever you're at? What were the thoughts then happening, in that time period where, it's, the first week turns into a month and then a month turns into a couple? Like what was going through your head then?
It's a
What were
lot
the
of dark
thoughts?
lot of darkness, a lot of darkness.
What
I
did it sound like?
It sounded like, I don't know how life is gonna move forward. I can't believe that I'm in this situation. And replaying and replaying and replaying and replaying the scenarios and just how could I have done this differently? And how do I approach them? How do I start this up again? How do I and there was just on top of one story, another story got built that resulted in pushing and making things worse and worse in terms of communication with my ex. It wasn't pleasant on how that unfolded, and I know I could have handled that differently, and possibly she could have handled it differently, but when there is such a tense situation taking place, it's not the best version of us that actually shows up. So a lot of dark thoughts of uncertainty, especially as my life started spiraling down financially. Came to a very close edge in my life there because the two businesses I was running imploded because I didn't focus on them at all for almost a year. It was such a traumatic thing. Um, I felt very lonely as well. Nobody around me knew what I was going through. I didn't speak to my family about this. I had spoken, fortunately, to that mentor, and he at least didn't add fuel to the fire. He at least asked better questions each time that I saw him and didn't try and fix the situation for
Mm,
me, was just present and asked me those questions for me to find my way out of the abyss.
yeah. Do you remember specifically what the thoughts sound like when they're dark and what the thoughts sound like when your business is failing and what what those hits are like? Do you remember those?
I think it's a compounding effect of shame that build up in the mind. I got to a very dark place. I got to a
Yeah.
very dark place
Yeah,
when you
same.
start
I'm
running out
with
of
you.
money.
Oh,
When you're running out of money, your kids don't wanna see you. Felt like my life had been ripped apart by 4 wild horses, and I couldn't see a future. I didn't know how on earth this would work out. I couldn't see 2 weeks into the future,
mm,
and occasionally I would get to such a low place that at least I reached out to this friend and didn't keep spiraling down. I reached out to him, and that would give me a little bit of oxygen, would stop me from going and drowning like going into the deeper into the abyss. And at least in that moment, those 7 months where I was at a very low place, having that conversation with him became a turnaround point. But those thoughts, it's the uncertainty, it's the not knowing how to move forward.
yeah,
It's desperate. It's a very
yeah,
desperate place.
yeah, it sounds like too, Gary, as a leader, and a lot of leaders are listening, and a lot of dads are problem solvers like you are in that moment, and you're trying to problem solve and work this thing out in whatever way, and I know that you hear it on your end, and I hear it on my side as well. So when this mentor comes to you and he starts to ask you some questions about it. Do you remember a couple of those specific questions that really helped you to look towards something different than these dark thoughts and this hopeless situation?
I wish I could actually remember. That's about the only thing that I actually remember was the what is the gift? 11
Yeah,
years ago,
yeah,
it was such a painful thing that it became a bit of a blur back then in terms of those conversations with him. I unfortunately can't recall the deeper conversations and the deeper questions that he had asked me,
yeah.
but the one about the gift is one that definitely stood out in my mind because that just changed the trajectory and instead of spiraling down, to start looking after myself.
Yeah, you know what, Gary? What's actually really fascinating about what you just said is that when our brains are under that kind of stress and that kind of pressure, our brain shuts down and we literally use 40 to 50% less of our brain. Our memories are shot and fried and you know it because you've been there. I know it because I've been there. There's blocks of time where you just feel like you miss. And so a lot of dads are in that place and space and they're trying to they have so much pressure, so much worry and fear that making that next decision about the future is so difficult. So you're in this, say a lot of times with dads, a blender, right? Or a mental hurricane. And you've got this mentor and he's asking you questions. How did you have the belief to take a step forward in the direction that he was telling you to go?
I think what took place here is I almost didn't have a choice but to take this next step forward where I did my calculations, and this is something that is quite hard to share. But I did the calculations and I realized I didn't have enough money to sustain my life and to
Yeah.
keep on sending money to the mother of my kids. That I realized if I kept paying rent, my car, electricity, all of the expenses, I wouldn't last more than 2 weeks. And so the only way to do this was remove all of those expenses and see where life takes me. And this was through having a conversation. This was one of the conversations I do remember because it was with my mentor and a very good friend of mine. And I was sitting in my mentor's lounge. We are talking about the situation of where I was at.
Mm,
How on earth do I move forward here? One of the options was to just go down a pathway where from running businesses, go to finding a job, maybe in another city that I could actually start to heal. But that process to even find a job was completely unknown of how long that would even take. And would I even be able to sustain my life for very long, even trying to get a job, having not worked for a long time? The other option was go and start traveling, do pay as you feel speaking. So getting speaking engagements, talking about my story and what I'd gone through here, build some websites. That is a skill that I had. And because my costs were so low, I would be able to cover my expenses by paying the money to the mother of my children and the basic overheads of food and basic survival. And that would continue extending the runway. But life just opened up the moment that in that lounge that I made that decision to free fall going down that pathway. It is incredible on how when I surrendered to that moment, that life just it expanded and phenomenal on how it unfolded from there.
what then happened? Because I was, just recently in our group, I went through and you're obviously super aware of this. I know that I'm not telling you anything new, but, I sort of dissected the hero's journey for a divorced dad. And what it sounds like there in the hero's journey, they have this ordinary life and then they have this conflict, right? And it's in every movie, every story. You have this conflict, this divorce, this alienation, right? And then you have this guy that shows up and this guy shows up. It's like in Luke in Star Wars. I share like Luke Skywalker. His family's decimated in the original, and then all of a sudden Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up, and now Luke has a decision: do I stay here or do I follow the guide? And I cross the threshold into this complete unknown situation? And that's what you're in. So you cross this threshold, and you have this guide, this mentor, and a couple colleagues. What happens next for you?
Well, because I was having the conversation in the lounge there, my good friend that was there, he said, "Well, since Gary, you are gonna be taking this free fall," and we had actually set up a small business together with that friend, but because I wasn't able to focus on this, that business was also affected. Fortunately, he had another business to sustain his life, but realizing that I was gonna be stepping away from that business, he said, "Well, Gary, hey, since you're not going to be here, I've been asked to run a cycling event." It was, I think, 1,000-kilometer journey across the UK to set up the base camps for that event. Uh, the base camp paid, which would have worked out to a month's worth of income for me. And I will contact the race director to see if you can actually take my position in that so that I can move forward with that business. And he called the race director, ended up speaking to the race director on that call. She approved me getting that position, and it was setting up on the far south of the UK. And that position started a week later. So I immediately had an injection a week later. And the day before I was driving to go to that event, I had 10 bags of my clothes that I was dropping off at the Red Cross. I'd given away most of the things that I had, sold a few other things that gave me a little bit more of a runway. But as I was giving these bags to the Red Cross, the race director called me again and said, "Gary, I've just had a cancellation for the final leg in Scotland for the close of the race. Can you run that as well?" And I said, "Absolutely. Another month of runway."
Wow.
So phenomenal there. And then, so that gave me 2 months of runway. And then when came back from Scotland, I had an opportunity for a project management job or just freelancing work in London. And in the interview, uh, the guy said to me, "Hey, Gary, I've just resigned from the position running the larger project. Would you like to take my position?" And so instead of it just being 2 days of work, it ended up being 2 years of freelance work that just landed in my lap, running the work for an arts organization, creative. It was just phenomenal team and gave me the funding to just transform my life. Suddenly I had the fuel again coming into my life, the money. I was able to keep paying maintenance. I was able to rebuild my life with those sequence of events of the free fall and trusting in life.
So during that period of time, I don't wanna assume you had a reason or any of that, but what was your why when you were taking that, those little cycling jobs, and what was the why? What actually got you to say, I'm gonna do this?
It was life. It was lifeblood.
Were
If
you
I said
thinking were you thinking you were gonna see your kids again, or was it just like, "I just have to survive right now?"
in that moment, knowing I had 2 weeks left, it was survival, it was extending the runway. This plane
Yeah,
that was coming into crash, this gave me another month of runway to allow me to figure out how would things play out, giving me maybe a lot more time to figure things out, to be able to see my kids in the future. But I wasn't thinking in that moment about my kids. It was a pure survival. When you get to that edge of life, it is survival in that moment. But still in
100%.
my mind, I always was thinking, how do I send the money to my kids? That wasn't ever, um, that they weren't ever placed in a terrible place not receiving that money.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's when you're in that moment of, "This is the runway that I have left," you do whatever it takes to get you there, and then it sounds like, doors started to open up, you crossed the threshold, you started walking down this path, not knowing what is gonna happen next, but just opening up the next door of what was possible, what was there, which is incredible, and I think what I wanna jump into in a little bit of a way is, we're talking through that whole process of just so much unknown and so much fear and frustration and failure. And I know there's dads that are listening that they're awesome dads, they're great dads. They don't listen because they don't want to be great dads. That's why they're here. And I guess in this situation, if you're talking to a dad, um, why do why do great dads lose ground in this scenario with their children and potential alienation? Why does that happen? What have you noticed?
Emotions get in the way. Communication often with the mother gets inflamed. Fathers don't have good habits within their life. They are when they go through a separation, go through a divorce, where there's courts involved or just fighting with their ex and the uncertainty of this, they stop looking after themselves. They sleep gets affected, their other habits show up, potentially alcohol, potentially bad food habits, scrolling on social media, which results in you not being the best version of yourself when it does come to an interaction with the mother of your kids or your kids. So a small situation suddenly just becomes massively inflamed because you're in a deficit state even entering that conversation. And so it's the A, not the best version of them showing up, B, um, reacting in the moment is a huge thing, and not remaining grounded, being triggered by the mother and whatever the mother is saying, and not remaining grounding into that situation. And then three, the one that as a massive catalyst, and this is a big warning for fathers, is to never ever talk negatively. If you are speaking to the kids and the kids are saying something negative that the mother has clearly said to the kids, is to not get swilled into that to say something negative about the mother. Your mother is lying to you. She's not telling the truth. Those are the things that become massive catalysts. That brings gasoline, like gallons of fuel to a small fire, makes that a significant fire. So critical to, uh, as a important rule for any father, to not go down that pathway ever talking negatively about the other parent.
All right, Gary, I'm gonna jump in. This one popped in, and I know you and I both hear this a ton. So I'm really curious, and I know dads are as well. How, knowing what you know now, having all that pain that you've gone through, what do you tell dads in this scenario that would say, "My ex is a narcissist. How do I control this narcissistic co-parent?" What do you share with them? How do you walk them down that road?
That combination, a narcissist and a co-parent, I don't know if that's possible. It's a narcissist and a parallel parent with them. Uh, by even trying to label how all of these things, she's got a personality disorder, she's a COVID narcissist, or anything like that, doesn't really help you. Does it really change the course of your situation outside of knowing how to navigate that in terms of getting the help on dealing with that narcissist? But it's important to not get swirled into the frustration of that human being that you're interacting with, and that is the mother of your kids. Through educating on yourself and how to deal with that, that is a practical component and a path you can go down. In knowing that if the parent is a narcissist, it's almost impossible to co-parent. This is where parallel parenting, where you can't get to an equal footing or a doing what's best for the kids. It's almost impossible to be able to do that with somebody that is a narcissist. Less communication is better. Trying to, and I see fathers spiral down over this, where there is a irrational conversation that takes place from the ex, pointing a lot of fingers, a lot of things that are negative. You don't need to respond to every single one of those messages, and definitely don't respond straight away. Ideally, respond in a couple of hours, even better the next day. It's going to be a far better version of you responding to those messages. And you're likely not going to need to respond to those. You don't need to defend yourself. Defense, when you're being attacked, just evokes a whole nother dragon inside of the ex. There's a very wise lady, her name's Byron Katie, and she says defense is the first act of war.
Mm.
It's phenomenal when you defend yourself, on how it just evokes uh, something like a dragon in the other person. It doesn't end up going down a positive pathway. You never win something by defending. There's no winning in a situation like this. It's just not responding. And if you have to, just respond to only the important components in terms of maybe arranging times to pick up and drop off kids. Just those components, not everything else. You don't need to.
So wise, Gary. I want to jump into a story, and I'm just be curious for a dad that one in particular comes to mind for me. So the story, which happens a lot with the dads that I talk to, great dads, they may have maybe it's a little bit of an anger, maybe they had a temper, maybe they yelled or whatever it is, and it gets turned into some kind of domestic violence issue that ends up getting thrown out in court. But regardless of the case, they're not seeing their children. And so what happens is they get a lot of these dads, stuff is happening. I got one in particular, hasn't seen his children in 6 months. Similar to your story, where children were saying something back to the parent and that gets involved and lawyers get involved. And so now he's in this 6 month window here, not seeing his children. And he believes most of the stuff is probably going to get thrown out. However, this man is running a business. He's he's having to pay for these lawyers. He's not seeing his children, didn't see him through Christmas. What would you be walking him through? How would you be walking him through that of what he's going through?
Yeah, absolutely. How old are his kids? Because it's slightly
Uh,
different depending
there's
on
a
how old the
couple
kids.
there, I think it's like 13 and 11, 15, 13, right in there.
Okay. Yeah, most of the fathers that come to me, the majority is between 11 and 15,
Yeah,
often daughters. It's a very turbulent age when you've got preteen and teenage kids. So, early stages of this, important to have a community, other men that understand, because what will end up happening is very likely he's speaking to a whole lot of people and sharing what he's going through and the craziness of the situation, especially if
yeah,
there's false accusations involved. That's going to result in a whole lot of unsolicited advice from people who don't actually understand this. You've got to get a better lawyer. You can't let her get away with this. And it ends up just stoking the fire even more. So, number one, speak to people who actually understand on how to navigate this. Number
yeah.
two, ensure that the habits that are inside that father's life are in a good place. Let go of anything that doesn't serve you. If you're coping with this with alcohol, stop drinking the alcohol. If you're scrolling on social media or watching shows, those don't serve you or help you. This is where the importance of working out, get those running shoes on, or just go for a walk in nature is critical. Volunteering, even in those extreme situations. And I know what I'm sharing here doesn't seem like directly addressing what's happening with the kids, but you've got to start with what is inside of the father's control. Because what the ex is doing, how the children are responding, how the lawyers are responding, the judge is responding to the case, none of that is inside of your control. The
So good.
only thing that is inside of your control is how you show up day to day. Because if you've been spiraling down and you have then a conversation with your ex or a conversation with your children, you're going to say things that are going to often inflame the situation even more. So, really, the starting point here is get your life into a better place, a foundation that you can actually stand on to be able to take the next steps.
Bro, fire, fire. I know you said you kinda dove into a few of those in that scenario, and this is a real scenario. So, like, I'm giving you, like, this is real stuff, and there's probably 8 to 10 other dads I know that I've been talking to that are in this exact same place. So, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that stands out to me, and I just wanna give something super practical, is what do you notice to be some of the biggest mistakes that dads make that sets them back in this journey?
So, from 2,000 plus fathers that I've spoken with, at least 80% have gone down the family court route.
Mhm.
And this is going to be hard for many fathers to hear that are in midway through that who have just started family court thinking that that is the solution. By going down the family court route, you've got to understand what is happening in the household of the mother with the kids. What happens the moment lawyers get involved and the moment that family court gets involved, this isn't a 1 or 2 week process. This is a process that can take a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years for some fathers. What happens in the household of the mom? Everything that takes place in court gets shared with those children. Okay. If it is a contentious divorce, a high conflict divorce, especially if there's custody involved, with the fathers that I work with and the stories I hear, those children are often enmeshed with the mom, where the children get treated like a best friend. So everything that's taken place in the court gets shared, but not a version you would like those children to hear, that you are fighting for the kids. That's why you're going to court and getting a lawyer, is because you desperately want to see the kids and you want 50-50 custody, or at least some custody of those kids. But what the story is that gets shared with those kids is, dad is just trying to take me away from you. That's why he's going to court. And then when you look at court, what happens is it's not a scenario where it's amicable going into court. It's gathering evidence against each other parent. And then that gets shared in court. So the moment court starts happening, it starts inflaming the situation more, because all the dirty laundry about each other gets aired during the court. And then that mother gets even more frustrated, more angry, and ends up digging her claws deeper and deeper into the children. And then the father feels, if they do have a good lawyer and a good judge, that he stands a good chance of winning the custody, maybe even full custody. Imagine the fears that show up in the mother if she fears she's going to lose the children. It evokes the mother bear, where she would dig the claws deeper and deeper in the children. And what weapon does she have? She has the weapon of being able to poison the children's mind. And that results in the children not wanting to see the father. So it's a hard situation. This on the pathway, and the mistakes fathers end up making is going down the family court route. There's many more if you want me to go into it, but that is one of the bigger ones that is very hard for fathers to hear, but it's important to share that.
Yeah. It's real, man. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's real. You're in a community, you have a community, you've been doing this for a long time. And so what you're sharing is the facts of the situation. And you're right. It's what I also would say too is, every time they get another thing about the court, let's say it's from your ex, man, what does that evoke in them, right? What every time you see that, it's they're not thinking about a beautiful time in Hawaii, man. They're thinking about all this pain, and then they got to do it again. And they got to fight it out. So I guess one of the things I was curious here in this is, why does trying harder often make it worse?
What it does, like the trying harder in terms of forcing to be able
Yeah,
to see your kids, and this
yeah,
is getting therapists involved, getting lawyers
yeah.
involved, court evaluators, it results in, and maybe the best way to explain this is, if you're walking in a jungle and you come across a tiger, tiger's going to run away. You put that tiger into a cage and you step into that cage, you're going to start seeing its claws. You make that cage smaller, you're going to see even more of those claws. That is your ex.
Mm,
As you're going through the court, as you're getting all these therapists and getting everybody involved here, it's starting to highlight so many of the negative things on both sides, and the fears that start showing up inside of her, that she might be actually could potentially lose custody of these children. And that is the greatest fear. Her purpose starts getting challenged. Her identity as a mother gets challenged. So just understanding that, how those, by forcing it, by forcing the mother to be able to see the kids, you see the worst side of her. You
mm.
force, like, think about it. You try and force a teenager to eat broccoli. It's difficult as it is trying to eat something that's good for them, that making them eat something that's good for them, let alone going to therapy or seeing their mom go through something like this. When
Yeah.
they see the mom suffering, they become the saviors of the mom, and they start trying to protect the mom from you being the dad. That's what happens to these teenage children, is it starts evoking the savior in the children.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's exactly it with what it does and the shift and how they feel, and you start bringing out these things with teenagers. What's the difference between, let's say, I know you're getting into more of the, skewed, 10, 11 and older. What would you say in the situation with younger children? What is that? What have you seen there? What does that look like from some alien separation and trying to get that to work again?
Yeah. So, and this overlaps, and I will go into a lot more detail on this, but anything involving force here, whether you've got teenage kids or pre-teenage kids,
Mhm.
it inflames the situation when you get these experts involved. If you've got teenage kids, this is where they are going to become poisoned against the father,
Yeah.
because they're in such an emotional place because of going through and all the hormones of being a teenager. you drop in a negative thought in those hormonal minds and bodies, it gets inflamed so much more.
Mm,
With a pre-teenage kid, they just see the mother being angry, but the child, being a pre-teenager, often still wants to see the father. And then this becomes a really difficult situation where the mother is feeling protective and stopping the father from seeing the kids out of her own fears of losing the kids. You've got that child then gets caught more and more in the middle, whether it's a preteen or teenager, but that preteen often still wants to see the dad. And so then the dad fights even more to be able to see the
mm,
kid, getting more experts involved. That results in the mother digging her claws deeper in. And because it doesn't just take 2 weeks, that this could take 3 years, suddenly a pre-teenage kid becomes a teenage kid, and the kid has then heard all this negativeness, negative, 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 that eventually gets through the layers, hormones kick in, suddenly that child rejects the father, and then the father is, I don't understand why the my child doesn't want to see me. Well, look at the sequence of events that have been leading up to this. And what I'm sharing here isn't just theory on how a approach of not going through the forcing and going through the courts works. I've worked with so many fathers now that have gone down that pathway of forcing and fighting, and
yeah,
it's ended up being years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years of going down that pathway. And then they come to this approach of looking after yourself, focusing on yourself,
yeah.
understanding communication, understanding what your kids are going through. This is never about ever giving up on your kids. You never, ever give up on your kids. But so many of those fathers now have reunited with their pre-teenagers and teenage kids that have come back to them when they stop fighting, when they stop forcing. And these are fathers that have thought, I'm never, ever going to see my son or daughter ever again. They are
Mm,
far too alienated. They're far too poisoned. This can be turned around.
they can. So when it is what let's say some dad is in the moment now. They've been a little bit more aggressive. They're fighting their struggle. They're listening to this. Where would you how would you walk them down that road then? What would be the next steps for them? What do they need to see here? I know we're talking about obviously looking after themselves, starting to have that blueprint. What would that look like for them?
Yeah. So trying to navigate this alone is extremely difficult. I do recommend getting help. There are a couple of organizations outside of my own, but ideally ones that aren't going down and recommending the path of going legal. If they find ideally an organization that is around focusing what the father has control over and having a guidance to be able to navigate this. So receiving that guidance, being part of a community
Yeah.
that they can share some of the challenges they're going through and hear how other fathers have navigated similar challenges makes a world of difference. Instead of guessing, how do I handle this situation where the mother doesn't want to uh, is not giving the kids over to me at a pickup. How do you deal with that? What do you do when my kid doesn't message me and telling me I don't want to see you? How do you handle
Mm.
those situations? Instead of trying to guess this and forcing this situation, you tap into the wisdom of other fathers who have walked this journey. And ideally, as part of my guidance, there's more extensive guidance to walk him through this process of number one, get himself into a better place on a solid foundation. And then you build on the principles on understanding communication, preparing for when you do get to see that kid. If it's been 6 months or 6 years, there's a specific approach that is vital to understand. Otherwise, those 6 years could go by, you have that one interaction, and you make a mistake in that moment could end up being another 6 years where you might never get to see that kid. Trying to wing this, you cannot just wing this. You cannot just guess at this. You do need to receive the experience of other fathers that have navigated this and have actually reunited with their children. Tap into that wisdom is vital.
Yeah. What have you noticed when dads have gone through this, right? They've had this conflict, alienation. They're probably wondering as well what their kids are thinking, what they're not thinking, what they've been hearing, what they've not been hearing. And then let's jump into the process where things start to work and come back together. What's the most surprising for dads that they notice about their children when they do get connected again?
Yeah. I want to just talk about, and this is important for the fathers to understand the challenges the children are going through here.
Yeah, yeah,
When you're going through a high conflict situation, this isn't every divorce, this is those high conflict divorces, and
yeah.
specifically where there's poisoning that's taking place. You see all of those signs. Understanding the environment that those children are in. If you sending a text message, it's very likely that the mother is going to be monitoring many of those text messages. So almost that child is in an emotional prison where
Mhm.
everything is observed, everything is monitored, and those children often get interrogated. So even after the father comes to visit the dad, and they go back to the mom, what did you do at dad? What did you eat? What did you say? And the child feels that pressure. So the
Mm,
child then goes through a survival mode in terms of just going along with everything that the mother says to avoid what the child see how the mother has been treating the dad. They fear that that is how the child is going to be treated by the mom. So the child just accepts and goes along with everything that the mother does. So understanding the emotional prison that that child is in, and understanding that so many things are negative being told to that child, that when that child gets to see that dad, I want to talk about two scenarios. One, where the child is forced to see the dad through a court ordered visitation versus the child showing up to see the dad on their own free will.
yeah,
When the
yeah,
child
good.
is forced to see that the father in a 20-minute visitation or a court ordered meal or dinner or something like that, that child is going to be like a shaken up jar of wasps
Mm,
because they've been forced to go there, because they know that when they get back to see mom, the child's going to be interrogated. The child is like a shaken up jar of wasps, is going to be very turbulent. It's
mm,
going to be a conflict type situation where that child is going to be asking terrible questions of the dad. Why did you leave mom? Why did you cheat on dad? Why did you not pay this money? And how is the dad going to respond to that but defending himself? And in the defense is saying something negative about the mom. So that's where the forcing is a component that doesn't work here, where you're forced to see that child. But when that child comes on its own free will, you're not seeing that shaken up jar of wasps. And I've seen so many fathers now that are reunited with their preteen and teenage children and even young adults. It's a completely different situation on how that child shows up. So important in when you see that child, and this is an important takeaway,
yeah,
don't arrange a dinner as the first meeting point. This seems like a natural go to. You always used to have a favorite restaurant. The challenge with a dinner is it's a face to face interaction,
mm,
and where it's and potentially an hour
it's
to an
good.
hour and a half meeting. That's a long period where either of you could bring up a question both of you are not ready to be able to answer or even handle. What this is building the bridge from your children's life back into your life, brick by brick by brick, to build that bridge. And that is from positive experience to positive experience, so that that child starts trusting again. That child feels happy to come back into that father's life. So by having a dinner like that, A, the time period, and B, it's a very primal thing. When you face to face, it evokes an emotional fight and flight inside of the person. It's not
Yeah,
going to be the best version of either of you if you're looking at each other's eyes. If there's a moment of silence, either of you are going to be talking about the elephant in the room.
yeah,
So this is where rather go for a walk in the park. Whereas you're walking 20 minutes, hey, we've got 20 minutes, let's go for a walk in the park, grab a juice, take that walk. While you're walking, there's maybe a dog that comes along and you can talk about the dog, environmental things. The main action there you're doing is the walking. You're not facing each other. It's a short interaction that you're building then a positive experience. And that child doesn't feel trapped in that situation. It's not a caged tiger.
yeah,
That animal doesn't feel caged. Like, I'm not saying the child is an animal, but it's doesn't feel trapped in that situation. But there's many type practical things, going to a bird sanctuary or some simple thing that you can do together with that child. So many practical ways on how to navigate those
yeah.
interactions.
Yeah, the other thing I'm hearing, Gary, as you're saying all of that is kind of what you said before is, and in our community, this is very similar roadmaps as well, is the internal is what creates the external. And if you're not prepared internally and the wiring isn't correct in what you believe about the situation, then you're going to be reactive. You're going to be defensive. You know, you're going to try and narrate or navigate the story to benefit you. And what I'm hearing a lot, Gary, is that there's this internal understanding that, you know, patience is huge and time is actually on your side to be able to have grace and mercy for the child. I would say even for your ex. And one of the things that I always will talk with our dads is the power of forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving everyone involved. Because as that happens, and what I'm hearing from you as well, that changes the meaning of the moment that you have with your child. And so I guess as we're even in that moment, and talking about what that's like, is that sort of the idea and the pathway for these dads to be able to navigate this combustible situation? Is that how that's working for them?
Absolutely. It's definitely grace. It's the understanding of why is the mother reacting in this way?
Yeah.
Why is the mother bear evoked? It's a very primal
Mm,
thing that she's trying to do. And from her perspective, she's doing what she thinks is the right thing. It's
yeah.
not necessarily what, from your perspective, is the right thing or right for the kids, but it's a very primal thing. Uh, Definitely forgiveness is a large component here. But as you start walking down this pathway here, and for the fathers to gain an understanding of the journey of the children, why the mother's behaving the way she is, the complexities of the situation, it it changes how fathers respond to this and the action that they actually take here.
Yeah.
So that educating them in that way, not being part of a community where all the men are angry and they're trying
Yeah.
to change the system and they're trying to take down the mother of the kids. That doesn't help the kids. That
Yeah.
doesn't help you in this situation. But when you have that compassion, the understanding, and the pathway on how to actually navigate this, and then hear from other fathers that have navigated this, that have been in the same situation, even a worse situation, that gives you this patience inside of you to know, okay, this isn't solved in 1 week or 2 weeks. This does take some time, but you're not just sitting on your hands. There's
Mm,
an enormous amount of action you're doing here, and you're definitely not giving up on your kids at any stage here. You are proactively working towards that moment of seeing your kids. In this time away, you work on yourself. You're preparing for that moment. You're honoring your kids by looking after yourself.
yeah.
There's layers and layers and layers to this.
When you say that, Gary, as you were just talking about that, there's the phrase, letting go is what came to mind for me. And I'd love to just kind of hear your thought because as a man and being able to problem solve and save the day and be a hero, the hardest thing, and I love the book by Ryan Holiday of The Obstacle is the Way. I would say for leaders, men, letting go has to be one of the most difficult things.
Absolutely. It feels like you're giving up on your children.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let go on this, but it's letting go of the story, letting go of the anger, letting go
So
of
good.
the injustice.
Mm,
You can either have justice or see your children. You can't have both. That's what a family court lawyer said to me. Gary, what
yeah.
I've seen here, you can either have justice or see your children. And
Yeah.
it's letting go of all of that, but never giving up. You're not ever letting go of your children. It's
Yeah.
just a different path that you're taking here, a path of far more compassion towards the children and the mother of the children.
Yeah, it's powerful, man. I again, like we had, I guess, mutual connects, and your stuff with 100K fathers is so significant. It matters. It's big and it's huge. And I guess for dads that are listening that are at that place and with a lot of what we talked about today and the group and the pathway that you have in your community, who is your community for and who is it not for?
Yeah, great question. So, the fathers that we work with are fathers who have had a great relationship with their children, whether it is being for 5 years only or have had 15 or 18 years of a good relationship with their children. And then
Yeah.
there has been this event that's taken place, or even over time where those children have become poisoned and then those children don't want to see them and they're trying to navigate this. So it is fathers who are either in the early stages of this, where they're seeing the signs of potentially losing their children, might be as a result of a high conflict divorce or some other event there, or for fathers who haven't seen their kids for a long time. But the fathers we work with, it's not fathers that have abused the mother, abused the children. That's more estrangement. This is more where there's been poisoning of the children, where the father was a good father, is a good man in that way, and has been found in a place here where he's seeing those signs of not seeing the kids, or the kids don't want to see them anymore.
Yeah. All right, let me ask you this, Gary, because I get this a lot, and it's I just love to hear your take on it because you're in the same space. So, what would you say why men need community and not just courses or YouTube University or just podcast? Like why?
Because number one, if you're just watching a course or you're watching some video, you're not getting the connection with another man who's walked this path. One of the components here is how lonely this feels. What ends up happening is the mind starts destroying itself, going back into the past, wishing you could change things, shame. There's so many components. But when you connect with other fathers that have walked this journey and are further ahead, and you can actually resonate with that, you no longer feel like this is impossible. It feels suddenly possible to find your way out of this abyss. And then it's real time being able to connect with those fathers to handle situations that are actually showing up within your life. You can actually ask that during a live group call. Um, and then the friendships, it's as you get into 40s and 50s, that is a large component of this. Many of these fathers have met in person. They've built these friendships and these connections. It
Yeah.
becomes part of the support and friendships. Uh, I think there's a large component, and we're also modern day society is so isolated. We used to live in tribes with so many people around us, and
Yeah.
now we are so solitary, and it's not a healthy situation. That it ends up being where you are sharing your challenges with your girlfriend or your wife is when you're going through this, it's not a burden for them to carry. They
Yeah.
don't have the answers on this, neither do your family members. So finding a community of fathers who understand this and the correct guidance is there is critical in this,
Yeah.
instead of trying to wing this.
Yeah. Gary, let me ask you this, and then I'll start to kind of pare this down for those that are listening here. But I want you those who listen closely because I think there's going to be a couple things here at the end that are going to blow your mind. One of the things that Gary came to mind right now, just as we were chatting, was what if? I guess the question would be: you go back to yourself, Gary, when you were starting in this journey, and I want that also to be the guys that are listening because they're in this as well. And if you were to go back to that Gary that you met back then that probably I know you had your guide as well, but you had you. And if you were to go back to that dad as he was first starting to run through this thing, what's something that you would tell him and what's something that you believe that these dads need to hear right now today?
Whew, great question there. I would say, number one, you're not alone. Number
Yeah.
one, you're not alone. And I've said that a couple of times. Number two is don't lean on temporary fixes to try and solve this. Don't lean on and like drowning yourself in social media or alcohol or some drugs, those coping mechanisms. Don't isolate yourself as well. That's something I very much did. I barely told my family about it. Don't think I even told my family about this. It was those two friends and that was it. So make sure that you reach out to your good friends. Don't isolate, ideally a community. Uh, get into nature. Nature is a critical healer in this. And then something that helped me in my journey was volunteering because it gives you perspective in your own journey. If you're volunteering at a food bank or homeless shelter or whatever it is, it gives you an enormous perspective on your own journey within life. That realizing there's so many people that have it way worse than you, And that simple perspective can stop you drowning in your own situation and can allow you to start taking those first steps in a positive and a healthy direction.
Yeah, it's huge, dude. I love going back into those moments and just giving dad something right now. I believe that when they hear these things, that it's a punch in the face. And so, here's the truth: most dads don't want to hear that your children don't need you to fight harder. They need you to be safer. Reunification is something we dealt with today. Isn't something you demand. It's something your consistency invites. It's this letting go, but also opening up. And Gary, your story is incredible, and just what opened up when you did the hardest freaking thing possible is feeling like you let go, but working in yourself. And dads that are listening, if today challenged you, don't rush to fix anything. Slow down, get regulated, get a group, get a team, build leadership. That's how your trust is going to rebuild. It's one calm decision at a time. And I just want to leave this with you, Gary. How can dads listening find you and your group?
Absolutely. They can just do a search for 100,000 fathers or 100K fathers. Google search. From there, we'll be able to find either YouTube channel, which I'm adding more content to, or mostly our website. From there, we do have, for fathers who are not in a good place, important to note this, we do have a scholarship program because we realize the impact that going through family court and the devastation that the devastating effect on fathers as it impacted me all those years ago. There's scholarships available to them getting help. Um, the important thing also here to share, and something that I didn't cover in the beginning, I did end up reuniting with my sons. It's been 7 years. My sons are 21 and 24 now. Phenomenal relationship with them. They've been a guest inside of my community, but I just wanted to share that before
Yeah,
we end up closing off this conversation.
that's
That
good,
it
man.
was a happy end to the story, and has been so many happy ends for other stories. And I want to encourage other fathers that just keep on going. Like Winston Churchill had quoted, "When you're going through hell, keep on going. Don't give up. Don't give up.
Yeah,
Keep
it's good.
going."
It's powerful. So yeah, check out Gary's stuff. He's a happy man. He's got a great vibe. In addition, those of you listening, you haven't subscribed, subscribe and leave a review. Listen, it's one simple thing, a couple clicks, and this thing gets out to other divorced dads that are going through absolute hell. And I know you are, but that's a simple thing you can do. If you're on Instagram, check us out, Divorced Dads of America. Let me know every day. There's some form of a coaching clinic for you that you can start right now today to do something small and simple. Again, check out 100K Fathers as well. Those of you that are in it, and I love you guys. I pray for y'all every single day, and I'll see y'all in the next one. God bless you.